So I have a question for you. Maybe everyone else is thinking the same thing. You're president and CEO of the Swift and Knight, large company. How do you wake up every morning? It's got to be very rewarding. Like, do you ever just sit back and think, this is pretty cool what I do? How do you keep yourself motivated? And then number two, how do you keep all of the employees motivated, especially during the pandemic that, we're facing? How do you keep everybody motivated? And you're very good with numbers. And every time you give a speech or a presentation to someone, you give everyone hope. And that's what everybody always says to me. It's like, even when I thought there was no hope, they listen to you and they feel like they can keep on keeping on.
Yeah, well, that's nice. I think there's plenty of reasons to be hopeful and optimistic. We are in a cyclical industry. Anybody who's been in trucking for any amount of time recognizes there's seasons and there's cycles. And you have to know the difference between the two, but you have to always be in a constant state of preparing for the next phase, which we identify 4 different stages of a cycle. And the pandemic brought a 5th stage that we didn't think ever would happen, and that was survive stage. Fortunately, that was a very short-lived time. But I will tell you, there has not been a day in my life where I've woke up and felt like, wow, this is nice. I mean, you can't, titles are just, you can't believe in the title. You can't let it become your identity. Titles are just temporary. And so anybody who's after a title will find themselves very unfulfilled as a result. It will not be what they thought it was. And so what keeps me motivated is we have tremendous people working really, really hard. And my responsibility is to make sure that we're not heading in the wrong direction. I have to somehow see around a corner that nobody can actually see. And so, like yesterday, we had a group of people, and this group was the right group to address a certain issue, and we are trying to anticipate, predict, and create the future 5 years from now. So we've spent 4 hours on a rather narrow topic, but we're trying to create something that doesn't exist, and we're trying to get there collectively as a group. And so because of that, the expectations are so high that you're never comfortable. And we've had people say after we have a really great quarter where we beat earnings expectations, or maybe you could even say outperform everybody in the industry because of profitability. And we've had people say, oh boy, you guys must be this must be an easy quarter. You're all feeling great. No, Adam Miller, our CFO, and he's the president of Swift. We sit there after a great quarter and we look at each other and we just say, how in the wide world of sports are we going to compare against this next year? Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to say we enjoy when we don't do so well. Relatively speaking, Knight Swift lead the industry in the areas that matter most. Safety, profitability as 2 good examples. Return on investment. And so when we know we're going to have something that will be easier to compare to next year, that actually feels a little bit better because we're living in the future. What's happened in the past, that's old news. So I don't mean to, I'm grateful for all the opportunity, grateful for everything, but there is absolutely no resting on laurels. In fact, I think apathy is the equivalent of decay. And that's something that people don't understand. If you're content, or if you ever let yourself in your mind say, I'm good enough, or this is good enough, you are already in a state of decay. And so the opposite of apathy would be just to have a deep down desire, maybe even a passion, that might be the right word for it, of just getting better. And if you're just always trying to get better, you won't be apathetic. You won't be subject to decay. Now, like when I do my home improvement projects that are more of mental therapy than anything else, or more of trying to get my kids engaged in projects and building kids and people instead of building a structure. I'm known to quote my grandfather who says, My wife doesn't appreciate this totally, but I'll quote my grandfather when we're building something and, it's getting long and hot, and just say, hey, that's good enough for the girls we date. Tell my son that.
Oh, I'm sure she doesn't.
She thinks it's funny, I think. Or that's good enough for government work. Well, you can do that on your home improvement projects. But you can't bring that attitude into the areas that matter most in life, for sure. So I don't mean to be preachy. I'm just a couple of humble observations.
So there is a poster in your office, Jackie Robinson poster. It's I know you shared it with us in several meetings, but I think that particular poster has great meaning, and we're going to show a picture of it, and we'd like for you to share the meaning behind that.
Why I like it? Yeah, so it's a framed picture in my office at home. And so with all these video calls we've been doing, it's what you see. You see me, and then you see the great Jackie Robinson stealing home in a World Series with Yogi Berra, who was one of the best catchers, one of the fastest swipes, and Yogi couldn't get him. And I love it. It's this moment of, number one, who steals home, especially without a helmet? And Jackie Robinson was so disruptive on the base path. He was just so disruptive. But when I look at that picture, I just think no fear. Mm-hmm. I think just go for it. There's so much energy. There's a never say die on a multitude of issues. What Jackie Robinson, with all odds against him, what he had to overcome racially, the fact that he played baseball differently than other players did. There's a racial component, but you're not giving Jackie Robinson full credit if that's where you stop, because he played with his entire heart and there was no fear. And so I look at that like on my other wall that you don't see when you do video calls. I've got a picture of a moon print from the Apollo mission. And it's just a boot print that when you look at it, you'll know where that is. You know that's the moon. And it's like, hey, why not go for the biggest and the best? Why not give your very best? Why not reach for the stars, so to speak? And life's too short not to. And so there's Steve Jobs is famous for saying, you're never different. I'm going to botch this, but to paraphrase, that you'll never be the same after you realize this one principle, that people that have created and developed products and other things out there that you really like, that they're no smarter than you and I. And so that was kind of a principle inside the mind of the 1990s Steve Jobs, who just did not allow for self-imposed restrictions and limitations. Now, that doesn't mean you walk around and you think you're entitled to everything in the world, right, but it means that many of the limitations that we find in our own life, and many of the things that give us anxiety, they're self-imposed, self-created.
It's true. And
so, I don't know, that Jackie Robinson, maybe even the moon print, they do something for me to kind of remind me to have courage, don't have fear, move on. Go. Game on.
Well, that was one of the questions. Where does he get his inspiration and motivation from? So we went ahead without even asking. So thank you.
Yeah, now we know.
Is there any books that you read that you would recommend to other people?
There's a lot of books I read, and I think a lot of books are fluff, to be totally honest. So my goal is to get through a book and figure out what are the 2 or 3 key elements. I think we're all in pursuit of understanding principles that often come from a lot of experience and observations, where it's a rule, it's a law that you can't control. And when you figure out what those principles are and you understand, okay, if you want a desired result, this is what you do. And so to me, a lot of books have those kind of things in them. I'd say that if you really want to understand business, there's a book called Understanding Michael Porter. Might sound really boring. Michael Porter is the Harvard professor that talks about the 5 forces that affect competition. In our industry in particular, people do not understand competition. This is a business that in 1980 was deregulated, full truckload was, and it just grew, and it was all about top line. Get as much top line as you could. Well, that strategy worked until 1996, and there's a lot of companies, even founders of companies, that never got the memo that this turned from a top line business to a returns bottom line business, and they still act in that old way. And the reason that happened is we oversupplied the market for the first time in the late 90s. And so now we go through this oversupply in good times, and then there's an undersupply, and then pricing comes up. It's just like wheat farmers. When prices of wheat are high, everybody plants wheat. Prices of wheat collapse, everybody abandons wheat. And that's what happens in a business that has a highly efficient market, which we do. And so people do not understand in business competition well enough. Michael Porter helps us understand the 5 forces. And so there's a book called Understanding Michael Porter that makes it easier to understand that than any other thing that I've read. But if you're looking to get better as a person, we are all familiar with 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. There's a reason it sold a bazillion copies. Most people already practice a lot of those because it's scattered and everybody else has used it and talked about it. But he does have a book called The 8th Habit that it's
The
8th Habit.
Oh, the number 8th Habit.
The 8th Habit. You might find that that's a fulfilling, that helps you in your personal life a little bit. But I don't know. Don't want to recommend too many books. I already did 2. That's too many.
Thank you for watching that clip. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more clips like that, please click here.
Or if you'd like to check out a full episode, click here.
And don't forget to subscribe to us on
YouTube.